Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. Today we're going to talk about R and Tibco Spotfire. I have Lewis from Tibco with us today. So before we get started, let's just go over the GoToWebinar control panel. So you'll notice there is a orange arrow, and that orange arrow is on your control panel, and it's either pointing to the left or to the right. So if you click that button maybe 2 or 3 times, you'll notice your GoToWebinar control panel moving from a maximize to a minimize to a maximize to a minimize state, just toggling. So once it's maximized, you can select your audio type. Now, most people are going to use mic and speakers mode. You can also use telephone mode if you're in the United States, but that may cost you some money depending on your long distance phone plan. Be sure to close other applications that you might have open that could take bandwidth. Things like Skype, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Gmail. Try to close down every application you can. And then you can make my webinar larger on your computer. If you grab a corner of the webinar screen and just drag it, it'll make the screen bigger. And then if you have headphones, go ahead and plug them in. iPod earbuds work great. You don't really need headphones, but if you have them, they definitely help. Then if you have any questions during the webinar, there's a questions pane here. And you can submit questions for Lou, and we're going to have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. And I'll just ask the questions, and you'll get an answer from the speaker. So any questions you have, just submit them through this question box in your GoToWebinar control panel. Hit the send button, and then I'll see them. So a little bit about myself. So my name is Ray DiGiacomo Jr., president of the Orange County R User Group. I'm a master R trainer and a healthcare predictive analytics consultant. And you can join the Orange County R User Group on LinkedIn groups. So that's just a little bit about myself. Regarding video, so we're going to record this webinar. We're recording it right now. It's going to be posted in about 7 days, and you'll get an email automatically from GoToWebinar with a link to where the video will be posted. But please give us about 7 days to get the video posted to the internet. So we have some upcoming R webinars for the Orange County R User Group. So on March 19th, we're going to do a webinar on an R package called TERR, and that's going to be March 19th. On April 15th, we're going to do a webinar on an R package called JMBase. And then on May 20th, we're going to do a webinar on the R package RCPP. So you can register for these upcoming R webinars at liondatasystems.com/events. That's liondatasystems.com/events. So I'm going to turn things over to our speaker, Lou. And what I'm going to do is change presenter. So Lou, you are the presenter now. Go ahead and show your screen when you're ready.
Thank you, Ray.
Great, I can see your screen. And now you have the floor. Go ahead and introduce yourself and begin when ready.
All right, thank you, Ray. And thank you, everyone, for attending today. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about Tibco Spotfire and the R language. So I'm going to be talking about how we have focused on extending the reach of R to the enterprise. My name's Lou Bajik-Jorgen. I'm a part of the product management team at Tibco Spotfire, and I've been working with R and S Plus since the early 90s, in both as a user early on with S Plus, and then various roles through the commercial provider of S Plus. So I'm going to talk about our history, just to give you a bit of context on why we're working with R. Some of the challenges that we heard from our customers around R and our response to those challenges, which is a new enterprise-grade platform for running the R language called Tibco Enterprise Runtime for R. I'm going to talk about why organizations that use R and individuals such as yourselves should care about this, what the benefits are. Give you a couple of examples and then a couple of links on where you can find out more information if you'd like. So I'm going to talk about our journey to TERR. Of course, John Chambers originally developed. Hang on, my slides just.
Yeah, you can just put them back into full screen mode.
There we go. So John Chambers originally developed the S language, which is the forerunner of both S Plus and R at Bell Labs back in the mid-70s. A company called StatsI, later Insightful, was founded to commercialize the S language into S Plus in the late 80s, the plus indicating statistical libraries and documentation and support. And over time, Insightful moved to focus on more commercial users, ease of use, server applications, and so on. Our development was begun, of course, by Ross Ahaka and Robert Gentleman in the mid-90s. And for a number of years, S Plus and R coexisted and both continued to develop. And then eventually Insightful was acquired by Tibco in 2008, and that's how I joined the Tibco organization. And we were combined with another product group called Spotfire, which is a tool for data discovery and visualization that had been acquired by Tibco the year before. And as part of our acquisition by Tibco, our focus on statistics really shifted to applying predictive analytics and statistics within the Spotfire platform. And the first step of that change in focus was embracing R. Now, what embracing R means is that we've really focused on making predictive analytics available to business users within the Spotfire context. Spotfire is an application for visualization, for interactive data exploration, and it's a platform for building applications that you can then share with others simply through the web. And so we focused on making the advanced capabilities of S Plus and R, and then later on SAS and MATLAB, available within these Spotfire applications, where the end users can get all the power of predictive analytics, but be provided the guide rails so that they're applying these predictive analytics in a proper way. And these provides a platform for sharing your best practices, sharing consistent workflows across your organization, and enabling these end users to ask and answer their own questions and get the answers to things like what if, applying their own knowledge of the business. In addition, we focused on providing predictive tools within Spotfire for a little bit more of an advanced user, someone who perhaps isn't comfortable scripting with R, but can do predictive analytics when provided the proper guidance. And so we provided a number of tools within Spotfire that leverage predictive analytics behind the scenes for these types of users. One of the tools we added most recently was a simple one-click forecasting. Behind the scenes, this is using an R language engine to do these statistics, but from the end user's perspective, it's a simple one-click tool to add forecasts into their application. And the general idea has been to bring these benefits of predictive analytics to a much wider spectrum of users so they can make better decisions, anticipate trends, anticipate opportunities and threats, and so on. Now, the way we've done this is by embracing R. And the first step of that was building a server called Spotfire Statistics Services. And this server enables the integration of R and S Plus into Spotfire applications, and later on we added the capability to call out to SAS and MATLAB analytics as well, and provide the end user the ability to leverage these interactive visualizations easily in Spotfire. Now, as part of embracing R, we focus on giving back to the R community, and so that means contributing packages to CRAN, contributing bug fixes back to R core, being a member of the R Foundation, and so on. And generally what we found in doing this was that our customers reacted very positively to the idea of leveraging R within their enterprise applications. But we heard some concerns, some things that were obstacles to deploying R more widely. And so, these organizations, and we recognize that R has provided tremendous benefits to individual statisticians, but these large organizations have some challenges to really leverage the output of these statisticians. Some of the challenges we've heard is that the core R engine struggles with big data. There are many different packages that try and tackle that problem, but often it means within an large enterprise, they may not use R, or they may prototype in R and then re-implement their R code either in some specialized library from CRAN that solves one particular problem well, or they might re-implement in some other language like C or Java or SQL. And this re-implementation means that the customer loses agility, because it takes time to do this, loses consistency potentially, because they have to retest whether the new implementation matches the old one. It delays their time to roll out into production, potentially causing them to miss opportunities or miss oncoming threats. The second challenge we heard from our customers is that Generally, R was not built for enterprise usage and integration. It was built as an academic tool for research and teaching. And it means there's many vendors out there who are trying to integrate with the R engine, but they're really attempting to use the engine in ways that was never intended. Some of the things we've also heard from our customers and from potential partners who want to embed R closely into their products is that while the GPL license, the open source license for R, is great for statisticians, it tends to limit what large organizations do with it. They're reluctant to innovate with it or invest in it because the viral open source nature of the GPL license risks their IP. And so many large vendors avoid a tight integration, and so you end up with a bad customer experience for someone who has to install and configure R separately from their applications. And we also heard from our customers that while R is free to acquire, it can be costly to maintain it in a large organization. You wrestle with version compatibilities, variable quality in the thousands of packages off CRAN, and the lack of really enterprise-level technical support for the R engine. So after integrating, open source R with Spotfire, we've heard these challenges from several customers, heard them pretty consistently. And so what we decided to do was to tackle them head on by developing a new engine. That new engine is called Tibco Enterprise Runtime for R, or TERR for short. And it is a unique enterprise quality implementation of the R language that's fundamentally different from anything out there, because it's a brand new architecture, a brand new runtime on which to run R language analytics, developed from the ground up, based on our 20-plus year history with S+. And it's something we developed to make sure it was faster, more robust, and more memory efficient than the open source R engine. Now, this is something we developed with a very careful process to make sure that we were, developing this respecting the GPL. And by doing this, we were able to license it for embedding and redistribution by other partners. And because it's something that, we've built the engine from the ground up, it enables us to do unique things that others cannot do. And one of the things that we're heading towards is the ability to do transparent big data handling, so that the same code could run on data that's in memory or data that's out of memory or sitting in a database or sitting in Hadoop somewhere. So it really allows us to do some unique things to push forward the R language. Now, since we're developing our own engine from the ground up, it means that we need to implement our own functionality of all the core R functionality that's there. And that's an ongoing effort over time to get that all done. Right now we're compatible with over 1,400 CRAN packages, over 1,400 packages from CRAN that can be downloaded and run as is within the TERR environment. And generally, the focus here is to take R and extend its reach so that all the productivity of the R community can be extended to run in enterprise applications. And so that individual R users can continue to develop in the R language. But when they want to take their output and reuse it in their organization, they can deploy it on the TERR platform. And so rapidly iterate from prototyping something new to production without having to recode, so that organizations can more rapidly respond to changing business conditions. And because we're using the TERR engine in multiple different products across Tibco, it's easy to integrate R language analytics consistently across an organization, into grids, into BI applications like Spotfire, into event-driven real-time analytics, which is part of Tibco's forte, and so on. So to make TERR available, we've provided access to it in a variety of ways. And one of these ways is a free version, which anybody in the R community can download and use, and I'll be talking more about that in a moment. The one level of integrating TERR is simply the embeddable engine. So this is the level that if someone wanted to do custom integration into their applications, perhaps do some custom batch work or leverage an existing grid or other management application, they can embed this engine and they'll have all the benefits of TERR: faster, more robust, better memory management, and so on. And so we provide a number of low-level APIs for tight integration here. And this is how we integrate TERR into some other Tibco products. We've got a cloud-based service using TERR. We also have a complex event processing products that leverage TERR. At the second level is TERR and Statistics Services, our server-based application. where you get all the benefits of a managed server in terms of managing pools of engines, load balancing, queuing, etc., and a set of high-level APIs for looser integration. And then, of course, we leverage TERR and Spotfire, where we use TERR to power the ad hoc tools and interactive applications that I showed earlier. For individual R users, like many of the people on this call, I'm sure, we want to provide value to your individual R users as well. And we're not looking to displace open source R from a statistician's desktop. We're looking to provide an enterprise platform so that you can take the work that you develop and have a platform for deploying it and integrating it without having to rewrite it to use some specialized library, or without having to re-implement it in another environment. To do this, we want to make sure that not only do we provide TERR for wider use, but we're a good citizen of the R community. We're sponsors of Use R conferences. We contribute to the R Foundation. As we test TERR versus R, we find bugs in open source R. We contribute that back to the R core team so that they can improve the core of R as well. We contributed packages to CRAN. Often as we're developing new functionality in TERR, we want to be able to maintain this workflow where members of the R community can develop an open source R and then deploy in TERR. So we've contributed packages back as we develop them or as we migrate them from S+. Things like S+ time series and SJDBC, both are things we recently contributed to CRAN. And then finally, the TERR Developer Edition is a free version of TERR, a full version of the TERR engine that anybody in the R community can download and use for testing their code for deploying it in the TERR platform, or just for their own use. The TERR Developer Edition is compatible with RStudio, so you get all the benefits of RStudio's ability to manage projects, syntax highlighting, code execution, etc. We're also compatible with ESS Emacs. And the TERR Developer Edition is free for non-production use and is supported through our community site. And I'll be providing links to that a little bit later in the presentation. So often, after talking about TERR and introducing it to a new group, I'll get a question of, well, how much faster is TERR than open source R? And that's a complex question to answer, of course, because you can do, a million different things in R, and therefore you can do a million different things in TERR, and different things will perform differently. But this particular example I like because it shows an example of how TERR deals with real-world code, kind of typical non-optimal, non-vectorized code that a novice R user would likely write out of the box. And so in this case, we're simply doing a for loop with row-by-row processing, kind of processing you might be likely to do in SAS. And an advanced user would be more likely to vectorize their operations, but that might be beyond a novice R user. So in this case, as we scale up and do faster and faster, as we scale up and do bigger and bigger data, TERR gets relatively faster than R because TERR's memory management tends to be more effective in terms of cleaning up unused, unneeded memory, being more careful in how we allocate memory, reducing the number of copies that are made, and so on. And so we found that, for up to about 50,000 rows, we were around 35 times faster. If you go up to 500,000 rows, we end up 150 times faster. You go up to large enough data, and we're infinitely faster because eventually R runs out of memory and TERR keeps going. And the key thing here is that no code modification was required. This is TERR running existing real-world simple R code faster without having to use some specialized package. Now, we're looking for more real-world performance tests, and so please feel free. I'll have a link to the TIP community and my contact info. Feel free to contact us about what you'd like to see tested within TERR versus open source R. We run lots and lots of micro tests, which are individual operations on TERR versus R, where on average those micro tests are 2 to 10 times faster. But again, it really depends on the kind of individual operation and the size of the data. If you'd like more information on kind of relative performance and our memory management, one of the TERR engineers presented at UseR 2013 in detail on this, and that information is linked off our community site. So that's where you can get a little bit more information on that. Second example of using TERR is the forecast tool that I mentioned earlier. Now, within Spotfire, there's a Spotfire visualization here, you can right-click and add a forecast to Spotfire. Now, in this case, advanced users can also tune the settings, but the simple use is one click. And the key point here is this is using the TERR engine. That TERR is now embedded with every copy of Spotfire desktop. And so anybody who has Spotfire gets access to the power of TERR, which we're now using to build tools within Spotfire that can be leveraged by a wider audience. And really, the goal here is to extend the ability to do predictive analytics to a much wider audience and provide an entry point into all the other predictive capabilities we have in the Spotfire platform. We're also using TERR within our complex event processing, our event-driven applications, one of which is called Tibco Streambase. And Tibco Streambase drives event-driven analysis within the Spotfire platform so that you can apply predictive models in real time for things like making a best marketing offer or customer churn or predictive maintenance on your equipment and so on. And the idea here is that you can develop a model in TERR, either standalone or under Spotfire, then take that model and deploy it into your real-time system. You can see here that there's a TERR node within this Streambase workflow. And so the idea is you can very quickly take a model that you've developed, deploy it out without having to recode it in some other environment. And not only can you deploy it out easily, you can then update it easily so that as business conditions change, as perhaps people start to try and commit fraud in new and creative ways because you've stopped the old ways with your predictive models, you can very rapidly analyze that data, determine the best new model, and deploy that out without a lengthy development process. We also use TERR on the cloud. Available on the Tibco Cloud Marketplace is called Tibco Cloud Compute Grid. This uses a Tibco infrastructure called Data Synapse Grid Server, which has been used by a large number of Wall Street firms to manage tens of thousands of nodes on their grids. And this is great for pure computational work, things like Monte Carlo simulations, where you can run complex statistical models orders of magnitude faster on the cloud. This is something that uses an existing Amazon EC2 account, so it's very easy to get going, to run very, very large grid jobs using the R language under TERR. And if you search for Tibco Cloud Marketplace, you can find that. There's a free starter version of this as well, where you can use up to 4 CPUs free. Then larger deployments have some cost associated with them. And so now let me get into using a couple of demos. And really my focus here is going to be how do we make predictive analytics in the R language available within Spotfire to make better applications. And so I'm going to start off with a finished Spotfire application that uses some advanced analytics and show how Spotfire can be used to wrap that complexity of predictive analytics into a very user-friendly interface. Then I'll talk a little bit about data functions, which is our functionality for how you make this R language statistics available in Spotfire. And then also demo a little bit of the forecast tools for a simpler capability within Spotfire. So let me switch over to Spotfire. So this is an example of a Spotfire application. In this case, we're looking at some data associated with bank customers, people who have applied for credit. And so we've got a good deal of information here in terms of the demographics for each of these customers. And we also have a response variable labeled evaluation, which indicates whether or not each customer was decided as a good credit risk after an exhaustive evaluation. So we want to see if we can build a predictive model that makes it a little bit easier, a simpler set of variables to make that kind of credit risk evaluation. And of course, Spotfire, without any additional capabilities, provides a tremendous amount of flexibility for visualizing your data. And so I could go through here and just look at the individual variables that I'm trying to predict with, things like employment status, property, bank, whether they're a foreign worker, and so on. And also numerical predictors, like things like how long have they been a member of the bank, how much credit do they have in the past, what's their age, etc. And so I could step by step visually explore these individual predictors to decide if there are things that are worth putting into my model. But of course, I want to use predictive analytics to get a deeper answer, in addition to just my visual exploration. And so within Spotfire, we've created this application that makes it very easy to look at these different predictors, choose what my response is going to be, which in the case is the evaluation, and go ahead and sort it. Now in this case, I called out to TERR. There's some R language statistics that I set up there to do this categorical prediction. And have gotten the result back. And I can see very quickly in the relative strength, status of an existing checking account, credit history, etc., are some of the best predictors. I can see here I've now have I've highlighted several different items here that going down to housing. And I can go to my next tab and say, well, let me now build multiple models, and decide which of those models really is best for doing these predictions. Capable to run multiple instances of TERR in parallel under my desktop, fit multiple models, and then return the results back into Spotfire, where I can plot the ROC curves. And I can see here, I fitted 5 different models. Looks like this model here, in terms of the neural networks, is the best model moving forward. And this might be sufficient for, say, a reasonably savvy user to decide what's the best model to use for their particular application. For a little bit more advanced user, they might want to see some of the details of the models being developed behind the scenes, get some of the diagnostics back, and look at a deeper level for their applications. But once I go through this process and have decided what model I want to use, I can then deploy it out. So in this case, I've deployed several models already. Any of which of these models I could then use in some other system. For example, stream-based complex event processing. I could now take this model I've developed in TERR and use it in real time within my operational environment to score customers as they apply for credit and quickly make a decision on whether to offer them credit or not. So this is an example of a Spotfire application that uses advanced analytics behind the scenes, but provides a very guided workflow for an end user to solve a particular business problem. Now, to use the R language behind the scenes, I have 2 steps to create an application like this. The first step is to create the script. We call it registering a data function. And I'll open up an existing data function to show you. So here I've got a window where I've said, okay, here's my script that's going to do my particular analysis. Here's the inputs that script expects. Here's the outputs that script returns. So basically, as an R language author, I'm creating a script that I want to make available within Spotfire, and I'm providing some metadata around it, the inputs and outputs that it expects, so that someone who's building an application knows how to leverage it within their environment. The second step, which might be done by the same person or someone else, is to then take that script and insert it into their application. So I'll go ahead and insert a data function and open up that same script that I was just looking at. And now when I look at that script, all I'm seeing as an application author is the inputs and outputs. I don't need to know about any of the details behind the scenes. That's the role of the R language author. Here I'm simply taking this script and saying, okay, well, this script expects a data table and a couple of parameters to go in. Let me wire it up to my Spotfire application just by selecting how I want it to work. So for example, expects a table here. I want to tell it that, oh, let me go ahead and use a particular table within my Spotfire application. And expects a parameter. So let me go ahead and decide how that parameter gets passed in, and so on. So in doing this, I can very quickly take this advanced capability that someone's developed in R and wrap it within Spotfire so that I can build an application like this, where all that complexity has been hidden behind the scenes, and the end user can just focus on what is the answer that I'm getting out of the analysis, as opposed to what are the details of the statistics behind the scenes. So secondly, just kind of a bit of a simpler example of using Spotfire. As I said, we've also used TERR to build a number of tools within the Spotfire environment. Tools where a user can very quickly begin to get the benefit of predictive analytics within this visual application. In this case, I'm looking at some weather observations. I'm looking at about 5 years of data for average mean temperature. And I can simply do a one-click and add a forecast to it. And black line's forecast. Black line is the fitted model. Dotted line is forecast. Red line is the confidence intervals. And so if I were an advanced user, I could go in and tune some of the settings here. This particular analysis is using a Holt-Winters forecasting. But as an average user, I can still access all the functionality of Spotfire. So for example, if I wanted to break down this forecast based on the weather station where the data was done, I can simply drag over the filter that shows me the weather stations, and now I've got individual time series for each weather station and forecast for that. Using Spotfire's interactivity, I can easily say, well, instead of mean temperature, maybe I want to look at mean sea level pressure and see how that changes functionality. It changes the look. And now I can see, again, I've got several plots. This has now been updated to do sea level pressure, and the Holt-Winters forecast has been updated for each of them. And so again, the idea is to wrap this advanced capability that predictive analytics provides in a way that a more typical user can access it and get value from it to help them make decisions. And so now, just going back to demos, as I mentioned, we also integrate with RStudio. I won't show an RStudio demo here, but basically when you integrate TERR within RStudio, it's very straightforward. You just point RStudio at your TERR engine that you've downloaded, for example, downloading the free developers edition, and then you get all the project management, the syntax highlighting, the code execution, etc. Capabilities that RStudio provides. So in terms of learning more information and trying it yourself, tipcommunity.com has a number of different communities focused on Tibco products. The TERR community is easy to find there. And on the TERR community, you can find resources, you can find FAQs, you can find a forum where I and other members of the TERR team monitor it and get your questions answered there. Details of what packages we're compatible with, what we cover in R now is there, links to product documentation, and generally high-level info if you'd like it on TERR, spotfire.tibco.com/TERR. I can provide lots of detail there. The TERR Developer Edition, as I said, is a full version of the TERR engine that you can download for testing your code and using it for your own use. Supported through the TIP community, you can find that at tap.tibco.com. The Cloud Compute Grid, the cloud-based version of TERR that I mentioned, is available on the Tibco Cloud Marketplace. And generally, we want your feedback and input. So, we're looking for real-world performance tests. We're looking for input on what you'd like to see us make TERR compatible with yet, that we haven't yet done in terms of our functionality. And so you can access that info, and you can contact me in a few ways, either through the TERR community or my email address or via Twitter. So with that, Ray, I'm happy to hand back off to you, and you can let me know if anybody has any questions.
Sure. Well, thanks a lot, Lou, for that. And it seems like Tibco's really set the bar high for the other business intelligence companies out there. I mean, what you guys are doing it's very impressive, I must say.
Thank you.
So we're going to go into a question and answer period now. If you're in the audience, go ahead and send your questions through the chat window, and then I'll ask them as they get sent in. And what you do is you just click the orange button on your GoToWebinar control panel, and it's an orange button with an arrow that's pointing either to the right or to the left. Just click that button a couple times and you'll see your control panel maximize. And then in there's a questions pane where you can send us a question if you have any. So, Lou, what does R compatible mean? Can I run any R code I want? Are there limitations?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, since we're developing, a new runtime for the R language, we're developing our own version of all the core R functionality. And so we don't have everything yet out of the box. And each version of TERR, we're adding more capability. And so we're 100% compatible with the R language itself. We've gone to great lengths to make sure that we are using R standard syntax and it's not a special version of the R language. It's simply a question of getting all the functions implemented over time. And so we've done, many, many things now, lots of information on the TIP community on exactly what we've done and what we haven't. I'd say probably the biggest thing we haven't yet done is R style graphics. That since we focused initially on integration of the Spotfire platform, we focused on using Spotfire's visualizations. However, in our most recent release, we did provide a way of calling out to open source R from TERR very easily. So if a customer has some particular package they want to run or some particular graphic they want to create, it's easy to supplement their TERR analysis with that. So they can get all the benefits of TERR for the majority of their applications and supplement it with R if they need to.
Okay. So my favorite, here's a question. My favorite R package isn't available in TERR. What are my options?
Well, we continue to support integration with open source R from Spotfire through our server, through statistics services. So some customers will, run two instances of statistics services, one with TERR, one with R, so they can, use both in parallel, and again, use TERR wherever they can. As I mentioned, the package for calling out to R, we call it R in R, is another way of calling out to R to supplement your functionality. And then in many cases, minor modifications to a package will make it work within work within TERR, or perhaps, many functions within a package as it is works within TERR and a handful don't. So there's lots of different options that people can use right now. And then moving forward, again, on the community site, we'd love to hear from TERR users and what they'd like to see us do next so that we can incorporate that into our roadmap.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here's another question. How soon will TERR be able to analyze data that's too large to fit in RAM?
That's a great question. Um, and, of course, Tibco, big public company, I can't give firm timelines on things, but I can say that it is something that is high on our roadmap. That what we've done in terms of creating TERR is that we've laid the groundwork for data abstraction. That, when the very first design meetings with TERR, we said, okay, we're going to break the assumption that all data is in memory. We're going to put in a layer of abstraction so that TERR can create an object that is outside of memory. And so it's high on our roadmap. I expect that to be one of the things that we do next.
Great. So, how is what you have done different from other vendors out there, say Revolution Analytics, for example?
So, the fundamental different thing that we've done is creating this new engine. There are a number of other vendors out there who take open source R, add some proprietary add-ons to it. And sometimes those proprietary add-ons can be very valuable, but typically a user is going to need to rewrite their code to use those add-ons, and that vendor's offering is still dependent on some of the challenges inherent in the open source R engine. What we've done is different is that by creating this new engine, we've developed something that's been architected using modern architectures from the ground up to be uniquely scalable and robust.
Great. Okay. What is Tibco's thoughts on predictive model markup language, also known as PMML?
I think that PMML is a great standard. Certainly, Zementis has done a great job of reviving the PMML standard over the last few years. That prior to that, PMML was fairly moribund, but there's been a lot of activity in that community, and that's great to see because that's a great way of developing a model in one place and using it in another. In the short term, our focus has not been on PMML. Our focus has been on making the TERR engine ubiquitous, so which is, from our perspective, another way of developing a model in one place and using it elsewhere, because you can develop it on the desktop and then deploy it under Spotfire or deploy it in a complex event processing system and so on. In the longer term, I would love to see us do some stuff with PMML because I think it's a very valuable standard that customers really benefit from.
Great. Here's another one. Do you have plans to open source the TERR engine?
That's a good question. Um, and I think that there's two parts to that question. One is what are we doing to benefit the R community, of which open sourcing TERR could be one option, and then the specific open sourcing question. In terms of benefiting the R community, I've talked about some of that, making the TERR Developer Edition available, sponsoring user conferences, contributing packages to CRAN, where we're open sourcing, some specific packages. For now, we've made the decision to keep TERR proprietary, in part because we've really wanted to invest a lot of time in developing this engine from the ground up and guiding its destiny. But open sourcing the engine is something that is still on our mental roadmap to consider for the future.
Great. So anybody out there in the audience, if you have any more questions, please send them now. I'll give another 10 to 15 seconds for any more questions, and then Lou can give his closing thoughts on the webinar today. So it looks like we are not getting any more questions in. So go ahead, Lou, and you can do your closing thoughts at this point.
Thank you, Ray. So once again, I appreciate everyone's time in attending today and the opportunity to speak to you. From Tibco's perspective, we see predictive analytics and specifically the R language as the lingua franca of predictive analytics as critical to the future of analytics and the future of business intelligence and generally making organizations smarter in how they make decisions. So our focus is on how to help individual R users take the intelligence, the analytics that they've developed, and deploy them throughout their organization more quickly, more easily, in multiple ways. And that's really been, our focus with the TERR engine, is how to bring all this creativity and energy of the R community to wider enterprise organizations.
Great. Well, Lou, I'd like to thank you for your time today. It was a great webinar. I'm going to go ahead and shut down the webinar, but perhaps you could put up a slide that has your email address, Lou, so that everybody can get that before we close it down. And then,
Sure thing.
go ahead.
Sure, it's actually at the bottom of the slide here, the lbajik@tibco.com.
Oh, I see it now. I see it now.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and close down the webinar. Everybody in the audience will get an automatic email from GoToWebinar within the next 1 to 2 hours from now. And you can respond to that if you have any questions that you want me to forward to Lou. Or you could just email Lou directly. His email is at the bottom of the screen right now. So thank you, everybody, for coming. And we have some webinars coming up, which I talked about earlier. Hope to see you at those. And everybody have a good day or evening wherever you are in the world. Take care.
All right, take care. Thank you all.